At the Molyneux grounds, the great Billy Wright said goodbye as a player to the game he has so long adored. Most football fans hoped he'd play at least one more season with the Wanderers, but the man who starred for England 105 times wanted to leave while he was still at the top.
Billy Wright of Wolverhampton Wanderers and England was born here in Ironbridge, Shropshire, in 1924. By the age of 13, Billy was a goal-scoring centre-forward and captain of both school and county. His schoolmaster, Mr. Simpson, realised his potential to go further and wrote to the manager of nearby Wolves, urging him to take on his young protégé. The response was immediate.
Dear Mr. Simpson, thank you very much for your letter of the 28th inst. Will you please arrange for the lad Wright to be at the above address on the morning of Monday, July 11th, ready to start at the ground? Again, thanking you for the interest you've taken in this matter, yours faithfully, Major Frank Buckley, Secretary-Manager.
It was the first time that Billy had ever left home, so Major Buckley placed him in the care of one of the other apprentices.
And I was called into the Major's office one day, and he said to me, I'd like you to meet this lad and take him home to your digs with you. So I took Billy with me, and I thought, the way Billy walked, I thought, you'll never make a footballer. He got that real rural walk.
Home for Alan Steen was with the Colley family in the Claregate area of Wolverhampton. It was a time Arthur Colley remembers fondly.
Being the same age, born on the same day, we felt that we'd got a closer affinity. To that end, I suppose, we became the best of friends.
Billy was the most kind person, and he got a good word for everybody that he knew. And we used to play together, play football, and he used to love it. And there used to be Sammy Smythe, Jessie Pye, also lived in the same house with Mr. and Mrs. Colley.
But despite his obvious skill, Billy was only 5'3" and struggled to fulfil his potential as a goalscorer.
His size was the biggest problem. He came as a centre forward. Now, who's going to be 5'3" centre forward? You got to be a bit good. And to that end, the Major did decide that he wasn't making the inches, which was essential. Well, the Major said, I'm sorry, Sonny. That was a stock phrase of the Major's, Sonny. But I think you'll have to go.
And he came in. Mrs. Colley said to him right away, she said, what's wrong with you, Bill? He said, the Major's sending me home. Oh dear. Well, it was a bombshell. Anyway, Mrs. Colley came up and had a word with the Major. We were all sad and miserable. So he said, well, right, I'll give him a month to sort himself out. So they moved him back to halfback, and he never looked back.
The reprieve was just what Billy needed, and with the Colley family's support, he flourished.
Mrs. Colley never treated Arthur any different than the three of us. And we grew together like brothers, the four of us.
Wright, he just was like a big brother then. Happened to sort of be a bit of an interpreter. There was me with a great broad Glasgow accent, and Mrs. Colley and that with a black country accent. And I was caught between. What is it?
Without a doubt, she was the mentor for Billy. Without Mrs. Colley, Billy would have been, well, he wouldn't have been here, I don't think.
Money was scarce for the young apprentices, and buses were the only mode of transport to the Molyneux ground. And it was from this bus stop that those early trips were taken.
Bill used to get the bus from up here, the corporation bus. It was twopence to town, but they would have to be there on time.
Buckley had a timetable, and no matter whether you were fit or unfit, you had to be there 45 minutes before the kick-off. Everybody. And it was great. It was discipline. And Wrighty was brought up with that discipline inside him.
We knew that somewhere along the line he was going to be a top-line player, because he was so keen and to lose. He didn't like losing. No. In fact, when I came back from the services, we were playing at West Brom one day. He tanked the ball out to the corner flag, and he expected me to. I mean, a pigeon wouldn't have caught it. And he gave me up and down the banks, because he was skipper then, you see. So I waited for a quiet moment on the way home, and I went and sat beside him on the bus and said, you do that to me once more, Billy. I said, I'm not going to fall out with you. I said, but there are ways of getting people to do things. I said, and that's not one of them. So I think it finally got home that, you know, you can dangle a carrot in front of somebody, but you can't drive them.
The war provided Billy with the opportunity of first-team football for Wolves. He even guested for Leicester City at one stage. Enormous crowds flocked to Molineux to cheer on their heroes and to forget the conflict.
People were looking for something exciting in their lives, and there was almost nothing more exciting than one could do than go on a Saturday afternoon and watch someone like Nat Lofthouse, Tom Finney or Billy Wright. That was why it was so important at that time. It wasn't money. It was the glamour. It sounds funny having glamour and poverty at the same time, but professional players were looked up to because they provided something, conversation, argument, passion, and they gave people teams to which to belong.
When I first started watching soccer as a boy, I guess there were four great footballers: Billy Wright, Stan Matthews, Tom Finney and Nat Lofthouse. Billy Wright was the only defender, and in many ways he was a very unique figure at that time.
Stars in those days were the people's stars. They were the people that you touched, and you asked for autographs when they came to Newcastle, and you were them. I mean, you picked who you were going to be. I was usually Neil Franklin or Billy Wright when I played in the back streets.
Having made his debut, Billy soon became a favourite with the Molineux faithful.
The crowd would call him Snowy. And all you could see was this energetic, and he wasn't big, I mean, he was only 5'9", all over the field. And you just see flashes of hair.
A strong-built lad. He was quick in the tackle. This is what Wolverhampton Wanderers, again, had instilled in him. They had to be fast and go into battle fearlessly. But he was built in such a way that if he was tumbled over and saw he roll over like a rubber ball, you know, this sort of thing.
Made you like the players to be fit and standard. I mean, we trained very, very hard, running. We'd opened up, you know, say Tuesday morning, running about 3 miles. Then you go down to a mile, then 800, then 200, and then the sprints.
And when did you see the ball?
About 5 minutes afterwards. That's all we got. But you know, the number of times that we won our matches in the latter stages of the game, the last 10 or 15 minutes, pure and simply, we were the fitter side.
Slater always got it there. Hooper, and there it is! That's it! Well, what a game this
Despite being only 5'9", Billy became renowned for his excellence in the air, having developed his own way of out-jumping much taller opponents.
He sort of took 2 paces back and sprang. And it was just like a salmon leaping up the steps at Pitlochry and going up the Tay. And that's just what he looked, because he was outstanding in the air.
Some of the great players that played against Billy, and they were always difficult games, were people like playing against chaps like Nat Lofthouse. Because Nat Lofthouse was a brilliant man in the air.
I didn't like playing against Billy as a Bolton v Wolverhampton, because he was a damn good player. The only thing I used to like playing against him was one particular thing, especially crosses. I was usually a little bit better than Billy upstairs, but by God, he'd give me a hell of a time.
Fantastic the way he could read the game. And he'd be behind the centre forward, if you like, and the ball would be coming to the centre forward, and Billy would move here like this, and the chap would turn into him, and he'd just take it off his toes and away. And I think if ever he went the other way, you know, he's through the middle, you know. But he always he could read the game brilliantly.
Wonderful tackler. It was balanced, not very big, but balanced, so you just didn't ever expect him not to win a tackle and come out with the ball.
But more than that, he had pace and nimbleness. So he's a good marker, neat. When he took the ball away from you, You know, that was the last you saw of it, and he's delivered it.
Kill a ball at any angle, at any height. And he was just more a stamp of greatness for me, you know.
Looking at the flow of the game and deciding that we really ought to try and play a key player on the other side out of the game, that sort of thing. And if we were looking a bit vulnerable in one respect or another, he had a sort of experience to do something about that.
He was a bit like Bobby Moore in that he was never a quick player. He wasn't fast, but he got around the pitch by using his football brain.
He was very professional. Yeah, he was a nice bloke, but I tell you what, when he stepped on that arena, he wanted to win. And if he got to stick one on you to win, he'd have stuck one on you, friend or no friend.
He was an absolute human dynamo. And he had a passion when he was playing for attacking football, you know, and I think sometimes that passion got the better of him, and there were some criticisms at the time that his attacking flair made him cause gaps at the back, and that, you know, and he had quite a bit of criticism, which I dare say at times it might have been justified, but he was that quick in recovery, his anticipation was that good, that to me the mistakes he made were always on the good side, you know.
His ambitions were there to see, you know. He was a great player and was determined to be a great player.
Right from the outset, the thing that impressed me about him was his dedication to Wolves. He was Wolves 100%. He just lived for the club.
I don't think he had red blood, I think it was all gold.
I think the thought of him ever wearing a shirt, nothing more than the old one black shirt, would have been blasphemy really, you know, never been heard of.
In June 1948, Stan Cullis retired as Wolves captain to take on the job of managing the club, making Billy captain in his place. And within a year, Wolves were walking out at Wembley, chasing glory in the 1949 FA Cup final.
Just before we went out to play at Wembley in the cup final, I had to go back up into the bathroom just before we went out, and I saw Billy there, standing in the corner with hands together saying his prayer. This is the type of person Billy Wright was.
Wolves and Leicester City. Leicester wearing white shorts. Billy Wright, 24-year-old England and Wolverhampton captain, made the presentation of the members of his team. It was in the 12th minute that a perfect centre from Hancock's gave Jesse Pye the very chance he was looking for. Wolves' second score followed a lob from Wright. Jimmy Dunn has a shot, the ball comes back to Pye and it's a goal. Finally, Sammy Smythe dribbled past one man after another and then put in a shot for Wolves that gave Bradley no chance. When Billy Wright and his men went up to receive cup and medals from Princess Elizabeth, they had undoubtedly earned their triumph. But Wright himself was well aware of the gallant bid made by his opponents.
Well, it was a marvellous game here, and I'm happiest man in the world today, but I would like to congratulate Leicester on a very, very sporting game.
We carried Bill off the pitch, Jesse Pye and myself. It was unbelievable, really.
The return of the Wembley victors was, of course, a triumphant homecoming. Billy Wright and his men drove in style through Wolverhampton with the trophy in full view and plenty of police to protect it, even though it kept them on the run. Team manager Stan Cullis at the town hall called on Billy Wright to make a speech to the fans down below.
I want to thank you very, very sincerely of giving us this wonderful reception this afternoon. Thank you.
It was great to be here then. In those days, it was magic, really.
Soccer fans from the Midlands joined those from Tyneside.
With Billy as captain, the Wolves team became a dominant force in English football. Their game was based on the disciplined approach of new manager Stan Cullis.
He made sure that we all knew the slogan that he printed on the dressing room. There is no substitute for hard work. Now, Billy and Stan got along well together, but Stan was always the boss.
Billy was captain then, because Stan had been captain, and then Bill sort of took over Stan's role and just seemed to emulate what Stan tried to do with the Wolves.
Stan was hard and tough and Billy balanced this with his sort of personality in the club.
And he got plans how to score goals. And if you got from your goal area to their goal area in less than 4 passes, you got more chance of scoring a goal by hustling and bustling and get there. If you got 8 to 10 passes, you wouldn't get goals as often. And that's how we wanted to play. And of course it suited us because we had the 2 wingers. I mean, in the championship side, Hancock's and Mullen, they were unusual, Gerald, in as much the ball could come over from either wing, whether it was to Mullen or to Hancock, and they hit the ball on the volley. They didn't stop it, they hit it. Now that was very unusual, and that's how we used to get a lot of goals. You go past the far post and the ball be in the back of the net before you could say Jack Robinson. That was, I think, one of our great assets.
Billy Wright, to me, was the most consistent player I've ever seen. You could expect the same standard week after week after week. If Billy ever fell below that standard, it was a surprise.
He played every game as though this was a cup final. And this ran through the team, obviously.
If Billy was going to do the running, then everybody else had to do that much running. And I think he was that kind of captain. He wasn't one to give pretty speeches or anything like that. It'll be just, come on lads, we want to win the game today, and that would be it.
He always seemed to motivate people. And to me it surprised me because I never thought he would turn out to be like that. But he really motivated people.
Bill Shorthouse, of course, was his vice captain, and Bill also was a great help to Bill Wright in as much as he was a hard man.
During the course of a game, we were playing and somebody did something wrong and he'd say, Bill, get on to him, you know. He got me to go onto the players about things, which I didn't mind anyway. And they accepted, the players were all right. We had a grand crowd of lads here, you know, and the atmosphere was unbelievable, really.
Bill wasn't the greatest footballer, you know, when you compare people that were playing at that time, Wolf Mannion, Race Carter, Stanley Matthews, Tom Finney. Bill wasn't a player like that, but Bill was 90 minutes.
Because he wasn't a forward scoring goals or anything like that, he was in the work side of the field defensively, being a wing half. I used to always say, well, he played well. You know, but it wasn't that outstanding that he was to be noticed and written about, but he played well, he had a good game. And then the next time, he had a good game. And this constancy of good games started to impress it upon me what a good player he was. And some of these others would have an off day. You know, they wouldn't be quite as good as they should be. And that was the reason why, ultimately, he had success and became captain of the team.
He loved England. I mean, he loved those 3 lions. He was captain, he was proud of that. It was a great honour for him. And therefore, I hear people say, oh, he gives 110%. Well, I don't know whether you can give 110%. 100% is maximum. And Billy was a maximum player.
The team that Bill came into, you know, it had players like Matthews, Finney, Mannion, Lawton, Lofthouse. You know, they were all very high-profile players at a time when footballers didn't have high profiles, if you can understand what I'm trying to say. And that is that there was only a few of them who reached that sort of elite stature. And he came into a team with probably about 8 of these. And I think the fact that he became captain suggested, you know, that Winterbottom felt that he was the man who could tie it all together.
What he was very good at was, prior to the game in the dressing room, he would go around individually to all the players. Not only say, well, good luck. I mean, that was normal, that was par for the course. But little things about the game, if you like, you know, if you concentrate on your first touch and your first pass is good, he was inspirational.
He wasn't a funny merchant, Billy. He'd just come and get hold of you and say, you're doing great.
An early example of Billy's leadership skills came when England faced Portugal in Lisbon in 1947.
Going out against Portugal, he said, now come on lads, we've got to show the Portuguese that we can play football. let's get in. You know, he only a few words like this, Billy, but he said them rightly. We had this famous forward line. You know, it was a forward line of gifted talent, really gifted talent. You don't get a forward line like that. The Blue Moon or the Hungarians, you know. But it turned out we scored 5 goals by half time, and they changed the goalkeeper. Then the reserve goalkeeper comes on, and the next half of the game we score another 5 goals past him.
That 10-0 win is still England's record away victory. Billy had actually learned of his appointment as England captain from the bus conductress who congratulated him on his way to Molineux one morning. And under his leadership, England entered a vintage period.
I think his greatest asset was the fact that the players respected and had so much admiration for him, both as a player and a person.
And even when things were going wrong, he would, as it were by example, re-energise a team to try harder. So many English matches like that, when we were behindhand in the score, we work harder and he would work harder, and in the end we turned the result round.
I think they were a good combination, Wright and Winterbottom. I think the two together worked quite well.
17 of England's soccer players are seen about to leave London Airport for their flight to Rio for the World Cup contest. 4 others already on the American continent will join them later. Meanwhile, Billy Wright speaks for the team.
The lads are in very good spirits, and I can say that we're going to try our very, very best to bring the World Cup back to England for you.
At the age of 26, Billy led his England team into their first World Cup with optimism high. After beating Chile 2-0, they needed to beat the Minnows of the United States to qualify for the quarter-finals. But it was to be a game that would rock English football.
Once they'd scored their goal, then they were doing all kinds of tricks, tackling Mortensen in the penalty area, a rugby tackle in the penalty area, no penalty. The Italian referee was just enjoying it as much as the spectators of England could be denounced. It was astonishing, really, in those days, the difference in refereeing that there was about in those days. And we scored a legitimate goal, but the goalkeeper pulled the ball from a yard over the line.
But even in defeat, Billy's enthusiasm for the game never waned. He was voted Footballer of the Year in 1952 and inspired the England side to more great victories.
I remember the Vienna game.
A friendly exchange of flags between Wright and the Austrian captain preceded the thrilling international on the Prater Stadium in the Soviet sector of Vienna. England, dark shirts, kicked off, well knowing that this was likely to be perhaps the toughest match of the continental tour.
Billy Wright, he was in charge of everything at the back, and he was always shouting to me and Finney and things like that. And after the game, well, we won 3-2, and it was a hell of a night. I don't remember much of it. And Billy was there, kept saying, have another one, Lofty, and things like that. It was a hell of a night.
We were often roommates for the whatever period of time we were together. And so I got to know him very, very well as a person. He was a very loyal type of person and a great, great friend.
Even though he was having this, we used to call them stinkers, he'd be shouting and encouraging everyone else, saying, well played, Lofty, well played to Finney, well played, Sam. And he may be just having a bit of a rough game, which was very, very unusual. He was the ideal captain. He was the centre of the field and he dictated everything.
Whenever we lost with England, you know, we'd be gloomy and so on, but he always said there's always another time. There's always another game.
One of the things about Billy was he was never afraid to accept responsibility. As a captain, he was playing for England against Wales in an international match, and our centre-half Froggatt got injured. And the centre forward, Trevor Ford, was a very tough, vigorous, robust player. And Billy immediately assumed the role and went to play centre half. Felt it his duty to do so. And played Trevor Ford out of the game.
The testimony of it all really was the fact that he stayed in the England team for such a long time. I think there's some people who are better international players than club players. You know. And I put Billy Wright and Bobby Moore in that category. I think they were better players at international level than they were with the clubs. Now, a lot of people in Wolverhampton will dispute that. I think that's a load of tripe, but that's only an opinion.
It's usually the goal scorers who get all the credit and the world renown on this, like the Pelés and so on. But the hard consistent, good chaps that you build teams on, they're not remembered quite so much.
I found Billy to be a very modest chap. He carried his fame very, very well. He never boasted, he never showed any conceit. He was a normal, superb individual who loved to tell stories against himself. I mean, one of the things that he enjoyed saying was that famous day when Puskás scored at Wembley, when Hungary gave us a hiding. He loved to say that the commentator was saying that the ball came over from the left wing and Puskás collected it with his left foot, and Billy Wright moved into the tackle, and he was still moving into the tackle when the ball hit the back of the net. And he loved to tell stories like that.
The great Wembley match began with Wright winning the toss from Puskás and an exchange of courtesies of a very friendly character, which is how it should be, of course.
They had gifted players. In fact, they had 5 players that I reckon were world-class internationals. But those players understood each other. They knew when Puskás was running through what would happen next. They were clever. They were good. And our press underrated them.
Coordination led to a goal for Hungary in less than a minute. The scorer's name is pronounced Hidikuti, I hope.
I think in round about half an hour they were 4-1 up. And the remarks in the press was quite funny to me to sit there as a player and listen to them, because prior to the kick-off, when they came out with the balls and did all sorts of fancy tricks with it, one or two of the press lads said, oh, it's all right doing that, but they'll not be able to do that when the game starts. And as I say, 20 minutes to half an hour after they were 4-1 up. But that was a real education as far as I was concerned as a player, and I think it was an education for all the England players.
We had more of the play in attacking play than the Hungarians did. When the Hungarians attacked, they used to score goals.
Despite heavy press criticism following England's first home defeat by a foreign country, Billy remained typically optimistic.
He was a very, very easygoing person, socially easy to get along with, good-humoured, good-natured. And as I say, all the time that I knew him, I never saw him either lose his temper or sulking or a bad mood. He had this temperament where he was very, very even-tempered.
We played together for 12 years, during which time, including league, cup and international matches, we played together about 500 times. So we did very well indeed. And during the whole of that period, I never knew Billy Wright swear. I never saw him drink. I never saw him smoke. I never, ever saw or heard a referee have cause to talk to Bill or to reprimand him in any way, shape or form.
He also loved to encourage young, up-and-coming professionals.
I struck up a good bond, if you like, with him, and yet, really, I was only like, all right, I cleaned his boots. I suppose that's as good a bond as any you can have. I cleaned his boots as a kid. And if for some reason he always went out of his way to speak to me or help or whatever, you know.
But Dickie Davies likes Sunderland, and after 10 minutes put them ahead, following a corner to show that it's goals, not pounds that matter.
He was always so friendly. I remember for some reason I went to Lillishall with the England youth team, and me and Alan Harris was chosen by Walter Winterbottom to go to lunch with the England team, playing against Mexico at Wembley. And everyone was very friendly to us because there was only a couple of kids there. But Billy Wright particularly was, actually took time out, very friendly, always. And from then on, he knew us. And if I ever saw him, or Alan ever saw him when we were youngsters, he would still come and see us and sort of be very friendly, like we were old pals. And there was something really warm.
Then, on the spur of the moment, Wolves swept down and Walker equalised.
Billy actually gave me a nickname called Windmill. And I used to have a habit of when I scored a goal or when I was running through or running away from goal. If I sort of wanted to change my angles of approach, I would swing my arms round, and Billy just called me Windmill.
I used to room with him when we were on tour or we were playing away. And we used to be lying in our bed, and I'd say, "What do you think about tomorrow, Bill?" So and so, so and so. I'd turn to him. He was fast asleep. He was so relaxed like that, that, and I'd be thinking about, I'm playing tomorrow, and I'd be all worked up for the game, and but not him. He's fast asleep.
These fierce Midland rivals met in their first cup tie for 56 years, and from the kick-off, the Villa, playing in their claret and blue with white shorts, gave the Wolves defence plenty of anxious moments. Williams, England's first choice, saved this penalty miraculously, but...
The 53-54 season brought changes which extended both club and international careers for Billy.
Neil Franklin suddenly decided to go to Bogota, and we were left without a really top-class centre-half. And whilst he tried several players in that position, he eventually turned to Bill, and Bill fitted it as though he'd played there all his life.
As well as Billy, there were 3 other wing halves in the club who appeared in the England team at different times. And I would guess the manager, Stan Cullis, was looking to how best to use these players, and that may have prompted the switch to centre-half.
But when the ball was lobbed in from the wing to hit the crossbar and rebound to Walker, he put the Wolves 1 up.
Stan Cullis had said to him that, "I think I can play you at centre-half, and I think you'll be a great success." And I know Billy was a bit apprehensive about this at the time, but of course he turned out and he played equally as well at centre-half as he'd previously done for Wolverhampton at wing-half.
In 1954, the Wolves faithful celebrated league championship success for the first time, brought to them by a team of heroes.
Billy, Bill Shorthouse, Bert Williams, Johnny Hancock, Jimmy Mullen, Jimmy Dunn, Ron Flowers, Bill Slater. They were absolutely fantastic.
Well, there was good team spirit, and we obviously worked hard for each other. You didn't sort of blame players if someone missed scoring or something like that. There was a very real team spirit, and indeed a club spirit. I mean, whoever happened to be in the team, then there was that spirit. So we were a very hard team to beat.
It was magic, yeah, it really was. We went out, how many today, lads, I could eat everywhere, It was incredible.
You just got caught up in it, really, and wanted desperately to be in there and, of course, winning.
Here it is, the match of the year.
Being the dominant force in the domestic game, Wolves also sought to beat the best that Europe could offer in a series of floodlit friendlies.
Voroshilov beats Big Bill Slater, but his shot goes well wide of the target.
Beat Spartak 4-0, but most of the goals came late on in that game. But the Honved was, I thought, a classic.
I mean, these were the big international matches at club level before the European competitions got underway, and we had this marvellous run of several years when we just never lost in these matches.
Honved was really the team of Hungary which had beaten England 6-3 12 months before. We kicked off and we were 2 down in 14 minutes.
Early in the second period, right winger Hancock's was most obviously fouled by Kovacs. The referee awarded a penalty. Hancock's took it and scored. For Wolves, the prospect had now brightened and they kept at it hammer and tongs. In the 76th minute, Swinburne equalised. And in the 77th minute, Swinburne scored what proved to be the winner. A tremendously dramatic finish, and what a triumph for Wolves, conquerors of Spartak and now of Honved.
At the end of the game, people throwing their hats up into the air, throwing everything up into the air. They were so excited.
The ground staff, they were finding scores, rattles, that the supporters, they even found a crutch. A fella must have thrown his crutch up in the air and lost his crutch. And they found the crutch on the terraces. You know, it was fantastic.
And Billy Wright was almost in tears. I was almost in tears, and so was Stan Cullis. And I mean, Stan Cullis was such a strict disciplinarian, you know, and I've never seen anything like it.
Looking back now at the headlines of that, they're very sort of vivid in my mind. I recollect Wolves bring back pride to English football and all this. And I think that that particular match was one that Billy would most certainly choose to remember more than most of the others.
Later that year, England were beaten 4-2 by Uruguay in the World Cup quarter-final, but pride was restored and they took on Brazil at Wembley.
They were well beaten. We defeated them quite comfortably at Wembley, and it was a very, if I remember right, quite a wet day. Tommy Taylor was then playing centre forward and scored, I think, 2 goals.
Haynes, and it's back with Taylor, and Taylor has scored. A wonderful ball to number 7, Matthews. And it's a lovely centre, there's number 9, Taylor, and England back in the lead.
And Stan Matthews was brought back for that game, who was then, I think, around about 37 years of age. So it was a wonderful performance by England and a great victory.
Hampden Park was packed for the big match when Billy Wright presented his team to the Duke of Gloucester. Then Doherty presented the Scottish 11. Scottish fans were in terrific form, but it was the last time they'd be happy this afternoon.
Hampden Park, 134,000 people. Bobby Charlton's first cap for England. And Billy was captain of England that day, and I was captain of Scotland. I've still got the picture on the mantelpiece at home, Billy and I walking out, and both of us smiling there, and me smiling and not know what was to come. 4-0 hammering. And even then, it was 4-0 and he was driving England on, and the Scots were shouting him because they loved him really, but they were wishing that, I wish he was in our team. And he was 5'6", he wasn't enough. He was a tremendous athlete. And he wasn't a big fella, he wasn't a tall fella, but his dominance and his determination there was unbelievable.
England seemed ready to take on the best in the world at the 1958 World Cup finals in Sweden. But defeat in a playoff match by the USSR sent them home early once again. On their return, it became clear that Billy's best-kept secret was out.
It would appear to everybody in the squad that Billy was a confirmed bachelor. And I was not aware that, you know, Billy at the time was courting.
When we got to London, we had this enormous gallery, about 40 or 50 photographers there and so on. And there was Billy, he was whipped off, of course, all the 3 Beverly sisters were there.
Can I tell you about this secret wedding? Talk about posh and Bex. This was a secret.
We were whispering on the phone to the registrar. Don't tell us all you understand. The most famous soccer hero of the century, the most famous blonde curly haired jaw with the blonde, both natural blondes, both called Snowy all their childhood. And they met and fell in love. It was a lovely romance. Can I say, Billy loved music. He adored music. He loved opera, harmony, classics, harmony, our singing even.
Don't sit under the apple tree with anyone else but me. Anyone else but me. Anyone else but me. No, no, no. Don't go walking down Lover's Lane with anyone else but me. Till I come marching home.
When I was an agent, one of the first acts I signed as their agent were the Beverly Sisters. And when he got married to Joy, it was the most wonderful occasion. The crowds that turned out were phenomenal. It was extraordinary. It was just like one of those big Hollywood parties.
That was the most unlikely change in his lifestyle. I mean, if you'd asked anybody that when I first knew of him as a player, they'd have said, nonsense, you're making it up.
As you can imagine, Billy Wright got a lot of stick when he married Joy because, not being nasty, but I mean, she was well known, she was a woman of the world, and Billy was one of the home boys, you know, he'd never really been out with a girlfriend, and we found it very interesting and very exciting, really, for Bill.
Football caps by the dozen.
and they've all been won by the famous English centre-half, who's now brought the total up to 100.
On the day that it was announced Billy would become the first footballer in the world ever to win 100 caps, his first daughter Victoria was born. A second daughter, Babette, was to follow.
There was quite an invasion from Scotland on the day of the big match, and they all found their way to Wembley. Altogether, there was a crowd of 100,000. The Beverley sisters, including Joy Wright, straight from the nursing home, now saw the teams come out. Billy Wright leading England, Bobby Evans, Scotland. The Prime Minister was at Wembley to meet the people who play top-class football. Billy introduces his white-shirted team. Now in comes the centre from Brian Douglas. Robbie Charlton gets his head to it, and it's a goal! Bill Brown had been beaten at last. But you can bet Billy Wright was pretty glad about that goal. There was, in fact, no more scoring. And after this victory, Billy Wright was undoubtedly the hero of the day. 6 days ago, he'd become a father. And now victory underlined his 100th cap for England. Yes, he was the hero, and his wife Joy thought so too.
The crowd were going mad, they were shouting his name, and the players all loved Billy. And it was, I don't think it was planned to lift him up, but it just seemed the most appropriate thing to do.
People don't notice it with Billy. He was consistent again, you see, through all these things, performances, and people are accepting the fact that he'd had 90-odd caps. But when it becomes 100, then it is something. And, you know, my one regret was that this achievement really deserved a knighthood. But in those days, getting honours for sport was very difficult. He got the CBE, Billy. But to me, you know, this achievement, really, of 100 caps, and, well, 105 in the end, it's almost unbeatable.
As well as his CBE, Billy received many accolades from other countries.
In Brazil, they used to have a system, if you reached 80 international caps, you got a special award, a sort of medal. And, you know, when we went out to play on that last tour, his final tour, they gave Billy this medal because he'd got 100 caps, you know. This is amazing. Another country honouring him. Quite a staggering thing. And they respected him, you know, very much.
As captain of England, Billy became the epitome of the footballing gentleman. He was an ambassador not only for his sport, but for his country. He was admired by millions.
Wherever you go, all over the world, the first, you know, if you mention Wolves, the first name that comes out is Billy Wright.
When we used to go abroad, everybody knew him. He was a great ambassador for the country, not only for Wolverhampton, but for the country.
He'd met statesmen, he met President Perron, Henry Kissinger, you know, famous people. And he was so warm and welcoming and so good. He was still the quiet lad, the modest lad, but he could meet them.
But even with such a high profile, he never forgot his adoring fans.
I've been a commissioner since 1949, but in 1956 I was badly burned. I ended up in hospital. It was touch and go whether I'll survive, see. And they organised this autograph book. But while I was in hospital, about 5 days after I was burned, who should walk in with the book but Billy? Nobody asked him to do it, he just bought the book himself. I thought it was an angel. I thought it was an angel.
I used to always call him Sir Billy, because he deserved to be knighted. He was an ambassador for football, a tremendous man, great family man, great father, and I had the pleasure of meeting Billy through his daughters called the Foxes, who did concerts with me. And Billy would come and see the shows, and he loved them, God bless him.
Whenever we did anything,
you bet.
he'd give us this, come on girls,
That's
come
right.
on, girls. Yeah, we will be you, Dad, you know. And we feel that he's here every day with us, don't we?
Yes.
Wolves won successive championships in 1958 and 1959 under Billy's inspirational leadership. But by the age of 35, it was evident that the glory years of football had taken their toll.
Probably could be illustrated best was his last tour with England, which was a time when he, as an experienced captain, had a young international squad going out on a tour of South America, which was always tough anyway. Billy was really blamed for failure because we lost 2-0 against Brazil.
And they'd won the World Cup in '58. It was arguably the best team they'd ever had, I would have thought. So it was never going to be an easy match. But it was a real sort of homecoming to me. You know, it showed me how far I had to progress from where I'd come through the young England team and so on. And I remember after the game, Bill coming to me and said, you know, don't worry, you know, you don't play against many forward lines like that.
We lost 4-1 against Peru, and Billy had made a big mistake which allowed their second goal to be scored. And then we lost against Mexico, and Billy was blamed for that too. But because of this, and because Billy was getting on in age, you know, as this, he was made to be the fellow, I'll carry the can.
After a glittering career, including 105 caps, 90 of them as captain, in June 1959, Billy finally hung up his boots.
Just about the last week before the season commenced, Bill said to me, he said, I'm going to advertise the local brewery's beer. I said, you what? I said, you've got no chance. How are you going to advertise beer? You don't drink. You never have drunk, you know. So he says, well, he says, I think I'm going to pack the game in.
At the Molyneux grounds, the great Billy Wright said goodbye as a player to the game he has so long adorned. He skippered Wolves in a practice game against the reserve side. Most football fans hoped he'd play at least one more season with the Wanderers, but the man who starred for England 105 times wanted to leave while he was still at the top.
But then Billy didn't fancy going on any longer, because he would have then he didn't fancy playing in the lower
reserves and things.
You know.
It wasn't ego, was it, Joy?
Oh no.
I don't know, just simply Billy.
Billy was football's most celebrated star. He became the first person ever to be featured twice on This Is Your Life. But as he discovered, being in the public eye had its pitfalls.
And he was offered, I think it was at the time, 15,000. Well, now, this is 35 years later, more than that, in fact. He was offered that to tell his story to the News of the World. And I said to him, you know, Bill, I said the money would be very useful. And he said, but they only want the dirt, Joy. And that was it, and that was the end of it.
Billy still had a thirst for his beloved game, and after 2 years managing the England youth team, he accepted the post as manager of North London giants Arsenal.
Having come from such a marvellous career at Wolverhampton Wanderers and with England, the expectancy was so high at the football club as to be almost unbearable. The amount of press, both in his football life and his personal life, if Gascoigne thinks he's hard done to today, he wants to go back all those years.
Billy introduced a youth policy, signing up players such as George Graham, Pat Rice, John Radford and Bob Wilson.
He actually picked me for my first 6 games in senior football as a school teacher, and I was an amateur, and it was quite something obviously for an amateur player to be playing at that high level of the game. I don't think it could happen nowadays, but I'm not saying I was that good to do it, but it is nice that it was Billy Wright who at least saw a little bit of his faith in me come to fruition.
But after 4 years of mid-table finishes, Billy resigned in the summer of '66.
In my opinion, as a manager, Billy Wright was unlucky. He and his team had a great eye for a player, and I fell into this team, which included all these lads that had been brought through by Billy Wright as young players. And this side suddenly blossomed into a side that for 6 seasons running, not just the famous double year in 70-71, but for 6 seasons running, it finished first or second in a major competition.
You wonder whether if Billy Wright had gone to a club perhaps with not such high expectations for the club itself, that perhaps he would have been more successful as a football manager, and his personality would have been allowed to develop.
If he hadn't taken the Arsenal job, if he'd have been a little bit more patient, he would have been the next England team manager after Walter Winterbottom. So really, he would have got the job ahead of Alf Ramsey.
Billy's expertise was noticed by Lou Grade, head of ATV, who had a new career in mind for him.
I decided at that time to televise football. And I thought, here's the man to do it for me. Firstly, he had all the contacts. And secondly, he had a great personality, he had warmth.
I've always been a fairly strong personality and believed that journalistic things should be done this way and television should be done that way as well. And Billy gave me a free rein, and eventually, after 18 very happy years with Billy, I became Central's, as it was then, because ATV had lost its franchise, Central's new controller of sport. But Billy was always a support, morally, and until the day he retired at the age of 65.
The smile was easy, it came easy. He liked meeting people. I think even when his playing days and his management days were over and his television role, they used him in a way that everybody loved meeting Billy Wright. He was so sociable. This lovely, lovely smile that was the first and the thing that I will always remember about him.
He was a very famous man who never chose to remind you that he was famous. And he had this fantastic gift of A, nobody in the world disliked Billy Wright, and B, he always remembered everybody's name. I introduced him to somebody who was a friend of my parents. 10 years later, he remembered their name straight away. He had some incredible knack.
He cared about all his colleagues and the former players, whether they played 10 matches for the Wolves or if they played over 400 matches for the Wolves. He cared for them all, and he was a lovely man.
He had one major problem, of course, which you can't ignore, which was that he had a personal drink problem. He conquered that and never had a drink again. A very strong man, Billy, incredibly strong.
Despite retirement, he still achieved yet another ambition when he was approached by Wolves' new owner.
When I was going to buy the club, I said to Billy at one of the matches, if I bought the club, would you be a director? And he said, oh, gosh. He said, I can't say. I absolutely would be delighted.
A lot of water's gone on the bridge, but what water? So now to become a director to the club that I've loved so much, well, out of this world.
Billy's first task was to oversee the redevelopment of the Molineux Stadium, which included a stand built in honour of his many years' service to the club. The opening of the Billy Wright stand was an emotional occasion.
Ladies and gentlemen, what a great honour the club have bestowed on me for tonight. I'm shaking like a leaf, playing for England, playing for Wolves, and nothing on this. But I'm very grateful for Sir Jack and the board of directors of Wolverhampton to do me the honour of allowing me to come here tonight to open my stand. That is a tremendous honour, believe me.
With old rivals now old friends, Billy was always ready for a joke.
That's the closest you'll ever got to it! That's the closest I ever got to it.
You realise what a wonderful person Billy was, because like the whole world would stop for him if he just walked from the director's car park down here and to get through all the autograph hunters. And it's great that he retained this great love of Wolverhampton Wanderers.
Yes, this is the actual jacket that Billy Wright wore. He wore this on all occasions. The directors of Wolves wore them then. I think they've changed since then, but Billy wore this, and I was very pleased to receive it from the Beverley sisters.
This is a very special present from Chairman of the club, Jonathan Hayward, Sir Jack and the board, and I will step away. If you pull that very gently, Jeff will watch.
I think we must have lost 7-0.
Billy Wright never shirked a battle in his life, but one he couldn't win was a short struggle against the cancer, which took his life on September the 3rd, 1994. The world of football, especially the club, which had meant so much to him, mourned.
Losing him was very, very sad. It was like, well, we were like brothers.
So it was a very, very sad day for me.
Couldn't believe it, you know. Even now, just what can I say? Just terrible.
When we heard of the death of Billy Wright, Tom Finney was the first on the phone to me. He says, "Lofty, we're going, aren't we?" And I said, "Well, you just beat me to it because I'm going to give you a ring, Finney." And we both of us went.
His funeral was the saddest, most poignant day in the club's long history.
It was a terrible day. The weather was absolutely pouring with rain, and people were assembled and lining the route from, 8 o'clock in the morning.
Crowds thronged the streets en route to St. Peter's Church, each person with his or her own memory, their own tribute to a man who had captured the imagination of a generation.
To see that place, it was packed. There were people standing at the back of the church, and it was amazing. You came out of the church and you looked across towards the civic centre, and there was just a sea of faces.
It was a sad day, moving service, and the town, of course, paying its last respects, did so, I thought, with flying colours.
And Joy asked me to go and speak about Billy, and she asked me to read If, the poem, which I did for Billy, and I think it's very appropriate.
If you can keep your head when all about you are losing theirs and blaming it on you, if you can trust yourself when all men doubt you, but make allowance for their doubting too, if you can wait and not be tired by waiting, or being lied about, don't deal in lies, or being hated, don't give way to hating, and yet don't look too good, nor talk too wise. If you can make one heap of all your winnings, and risk it in one turn of pitch and toss, and lose and start again at your beginnings, and never breathe a word about your loss. If you can force your heart and nerve and sinew to serve your turn long after they are gone, and so hold on when there is nothing in you, except the will which says to them, hold on. If you can talk with crowds and keep your virtue, or walk with kings, nor lose the common touch, if neither foes nor loving friends can hurt you, if all men count with you, but none too much, if you can fill the unforgiving minute with 60 seconds worth of distance run, yours is the earth and everything that's in it, and, which is more, you'll be a man, my son.
He's a great friend, and he was a great pal, and he was a great player. In fact, he was great in every way, Billy Wright.
We used to get the all-American boy with dark hair, with one of those jumpers with a big C on it and bands. You realise he was like the all-England boy.
He's one of the greats.
Billy was perfect. I adored him as much as everybody else.
I think that Billy Wright, the day he died, was exactly the same person as the young lad I met first in 1945.
He was Wolverhampton Wanderers through and through, and he was absolutely loved in the town.
I suppose these days you would hear youngsters saying they don't have footballers like that anymore. Perhaps they don't.
The easiest going of men you'll ever meet. A real charming gentleman.
He was the sort of player that enjoyed every minute he played on the field of play, whether he was a winner or a loser.
A perfect example to any professional player, or to anybody who plays a game for fun, of the way in which it should be approached.
Well, you're talking about the sweetest man that ever lived. He was such a giver of care and love. He was unique, Billy.
But Billy is now in heaven with Bill Shankly, people like Shanks, great men, Sir Matt Busby, organising the football team. So when we all pass away and we go to heaven, Billy's got the team organised, ready to play, ready to win.
He was the best.
He's a legend.
He was as great a bloke as he was a footballer. And he was a great footballer.
There's only one Billy Wright.
Always will be and always ever will be. He was unbelievable.